Alright, we're on the last episode of Tales from the Darkside of Season 1. Then we'll start Season 2, which I think Season 2, from what I remember, is the best season. So we're ending on a little bit of a lull, but don't worry, things are going to kick up. We're going to get some cool-ass episodes. This one is better than the last one. I gave the last one, Grandma's Last Wish, a 1 out of 10. This one's a little better, but not by much. And it's called False Prophet. It's episode 23, and it's written by Jewel Selbo, but she's got a little help this time. Larry Fulton, who holds back Jewel Selbo a little bit. As I mentioned last episode, he's a production designer of Signs, Unbreakable, M. Night Shyamalan movies. So it's not as annoying and noisy. This one's a more average episode. And we get our protagonist, a girl by the name of Cassie, who mentions her name many times and is wearing a necklace that it says Cassie. She's a ditzy country girl, and while she's not necessarily super funny, I feel like whenever you give someone a country accent, it makes it like a little more endearing or cute or something. So she's definitely not the smartest girl out there, but she's pretty pleasant to look at, and I think actually a fine protagonist for this episode. And she's going to Texas, and she's traveling to Texas by bus. She stops in at this diner, explaining that she's trying to find her true love, and she's really into astrology, and they make a lot of astrology references throughout this episode, some of them that I had to look up. The girls really seem to like astrology. I've heard this conversation a few times before.
I used to like a guy who loved all beef dogs, but he married my cousin. They served all beef dogs at the wedding. That way I'm prepared if I pass an astrological machine. I like to keep in close contact with my destiny. You must be a Taurus. You pay attention to business. My husband bought this.
Like, she keeps mentioning that she's an Aries cusp, which apparently is people that are born between March 17th and March 23rd, between Pisces and Aries. So she's really into astrology and talks about how this fortune teller, Madam X, a machine, is telling her to find her true love in Texas. All my exes live in Texas, and I also live in Texas. It's a pretty great place. You should check it out, just like Cassie's going to. And she learns as she stops at this diner that we have the son of the machine, Madam X, Horace X. And this Horace X takes a liking to Cassie and is pretty creepy. I think it's supposed to be a fortune-telling machine, but it's Tales from the Darkside, so this is obviously cheaply done. This is not like the fortune-telling machine from Big, which actually looks kind of good.
Hi, I'm Horace X.
Hiya, it's your fan, Cassie Primes. That's right, Aries cusp, Sassawachi, Iowa. Ascendant Gemini.
You could put your hands on my screen, Cassie.
Horace X keeps telling Cassie to touch him. Put her hands against his fortune-telling thing. I think it's supposed to be like his chest. Yet he doesn't really seem to ever say anything that's very pleasant towards her, and they don't really give any indication why she's kind of attracted to this machine. She meets a guy later in the episode who's a kind of fake preacher, hence the title False Prophet. He is definitely the false prophet. He's using God and religion to get in with the ladies. And he of course, talks in a country accent, too. This is a small-town diner, of course. In fact, it has such a homey, small-town vibe that the person who owns the diner actually leaves the place and tells Cassie, this person who just walked into the diner, to lock the place up and she could just spend the night if she wants to. That's very, very nice of them to do that, as Cassie waits for her bus that's going to take her to Texas. I think it'd be very tempting to shoplift if the owner just gives you the entire store and just says, you could do whatever you want. I'm going to leave for the day. Lock up. I might take a Snickers bar or two, especially before cameras. But Horace is kind of mean to her the entire time and doesn't want her to get on the bus. He wants her to stay with him, the fortune-telling machine, and just continue putting her hands on his heat sensor, which his heat sensor can also electrocute people too. So apparently it feels good when you put your hand on his heat sensor, but he can also electrocute you, so be careful. Then we get Father Heat that comes into the small town diner, and it takes place in this. And he acts kind of like a jackass too.
See here? This is a moment. This moment here is like a magnet between you and me.
It's hard to see who you're supposed to be rooting for. It seems like pretty much nobody. Cassie's kind of likable, but Father Heat lives up to his name and just starts turning on the kind of sexually harassing charm. And Horace gets mad at them, and they have a little battle on who's going to win Cassie's heart. Seems like she doesn't really like either. She's a little bit drawn to Horace, the machine, but she also does want to take the bus to Texas. She's not completely enthralled with him. He doesn't really do anything to win her over. Something they probably could have done. They could have had this machine, I don't know, talk to her a little more, give some history on where he came from, who this Madam X is, Just something besides, hey baby, touch my heat sensor. Hey baby, come here. Hey, Toots. He's just catcalling her the entire time. And that's pretty much all that happens in this episode. We get the ending that we expect. Heat Jones gets shocked by Horace the machine, and Cassie ends up getting trapped in the machine with Horace. This really could have used some better writing. The machine doesn't really do anything except for harass her, gives no details, doesn't do any stories. There's not really much action. And then they could have made the character, Father Heat, I don't know, like a nice guy. Because when he dies or gets shocked, you don't really care. He was being a jackass too. So everyone's a jackass. So it's like, okay, I don't care if Horace dies. I don't care if this guy dies. He should have been like the nice guy who's going to sweep her off her feet and she falls in love with him. And then there's a love triangle. But you can't really have a love triangle when you have a sexual harassing preacher and then a fortune-telling machine on the other end. That is not the threesome you want. So False Prophet's going to get a 3 out of 10. One thing that's notable about this episode is the main actress. She does an okay job here. I mean, she's supposed to be a ditzy kind of valley girl, so fine. But she's actually a singer, Roni Blakely, and was featured on Bob Dylan's song Hurricane. She actually did her own rendition of song Hurricane that I don't think sounds quite as good. You tell me what you think.
Everybody's lying in this petty sea. Another man named Bella moving around mysteriously. She sees a bartender in a pool of blood.
Now, I'm a fan of Bob Dylan. Who isn't? His lyrics are pretty good. And I do remember hearing the song Hurricane. It's well written. It's fast. It's almost like he's rapping. It's offensive. I like it a lot. But it is telling a story about Reuben Carter, the boxer who got charged for murder. And I've looked into this story, and I can't make heads or tails of it. I have no idea if this guy's guilty or not. So I'm not even going to take a stance on it. But after trying to throw him in jail for murder for decades, they finally did let him out. So I guess technically he's not guilty. So that's the end of Season 1 of Tales from the Darkside. It ends on a fairly low note, a 3 out of 10 low note. But we're going to kick it into high gear in Season 2. And we're going to get right started into Season 2. We're not taking breaks. And very fittingly, this is also a Christmas episode. Alright, check out our playlist of Monsters, Fear Itself, and the first season of Tales from the Darkside.